Okay, this is the Introduction to Depository Institutions lecture coming to you via YouTube. This is Mr. Chambers. This is Financial Literacy. Here we go. Your note-taking guide is found on Canvas, and it is titled Introduction to Depository Institutions. You are going to follow me through this lecture, and I am not going to post the slides. So here they are in front of you in video form. YouTube does give you the freedom to kind of slide in and out of what you need to do, and if you need to pause, great. But I'd appreciate you listening to this lecture and kind of getting some of the ideas. It's going to go a lot quicker since there aren't as many stories or that kind of thing that I'm going to be doing. So let's go ahead and get started. This is Introduction to Depository Institutions, also known as banks and credit unions. So the question is, what are they? They are it's a business that provides financial services. It's a bank or a credit union. These are places where you go to store your money, get your checking account, get a debit card, that kind of thing. When you have more money than you can fit under your mattress, where do you go? You go to a bank, you go to a credit union. There are a ton of them here in our community. I personally bank at Key Bank and the Freedom Credit Union, which was set up earlier as Educators Mutual, which was a credit union for teachers. We'll get into credit unions here in a little bit. And so think about where your parents bank, what banks are near you. We've got a ton of them, and I don't really need to sit here and list them off. So let's continue on. So they're basically two different types. There's the commercial bank, and then there's the credit union. And there are distinctions between the two. They basically serve the same purpose, but there are distinctions. First of all, commercial banks are for profit. They have stakeholders who are owners of the bank, and they want to make money off providing you the service of being a bank. They are open to anyone who wants to utilize it and has money to deposit, or they want to borrow money. They are open to anyone who wants to come in and join them. They offer a wide array of different financial services, and they are probably offer, well, they do offer more services than credit unions. They're usually bigger organizations, and like it says here, they're usually the big dogs in the world of banking. You have regional banks, the nationwide banks, things like banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Key Bank's a big national bank. They span across the country. I don't know of any banks that cover the whole country. They usually have larger regions, and they fill up their regions. For example, when I was coming out of college, I got a job in Ohio, and I was with Wells Fargo at the time. They have a big presence in California. They also have a presence here in Utah, and that was convenient for me at the time. But when I moved out to Ohio, there was not a Wells Fargo to be found, and so I had to switch over. And the reason why I did that is because, I chose Key Bank, and the reason why I chose Key Bank is because they are in Utah and in Ohio. And it turns out they're in New York, where I later lived, and they were in Michigan, where I later worked as well a little bit. So they are kind of a bank out of convenience. They were in Utah and in Ohio. They actually were not in Atlanta, Georgia, where I worked for a little while, but that was for a short duration, so it worked out just fine. Okay, let's talk about credit unions. Credit unions are not for profit. They are set up and owned by their members. Their goal is not to make money off you. Their goal is to provide a service to the community, and they do so as cheaply as possible. And they're not looking for profit, so they offer you usually better interest rates when you're borrowing money, and they give you better interest rates when you save money with them. They have membership qualifications. A lot of credit unions seem to be shifting away from this, but it used to be that there used to be a credit union for the teachers at Nebo School District, or the postal workers at the Provo Postal Station, mail, I don't know what you call it, post office. There you go. And when I was at school in Stanford, I was a member of the Stanford Federal Credit Union, and you had to either be a student, you had to be a teacher, or a staff member at Stanford in order to join that credit union. Or you could be a family member of someone who met those criteria. It seems as if now the credit unions are shifting away from this a little bit. So UCCU, I believe, used to be a credit union for BYU employees. It's expanded out to accept everyone. I believe if I were to walk in there, they would happily offer me membership there. So this characteristic is not as strong as it used to be. It still kind of defines what credit unions are and what their history is, though. They offer many services that banks do, not all, though, but the most common services you'll need, they do offer. And they are often able to pay you higher interest rates and charge you lower fees. Once again, the reason for this is they are not trying to make a profit off of you. So each type is unique. You have to choose what's best for you. I'm involved with both a bank and a credit union. I like the idea that banks are when I was traveling more, my money was easily accessible because I was with bigger banks. Now that I'm kind of settled in here to Provo, credit unions are becoming more and more. That's the choice I go to more and more often. It's where I have my children bank. It's a good place for them to start, just because they build a relationship where they're going to get better interest rates, and they are going to get better interest rates when they take out a loan. Okay, so let's talk about how banks work. And let me see. No, I'm just going to talk through this. Okay, it really basically comes down to one word: interest. Now, banks, we all know that. Let me back up real quick. Interest is the cost of borrowing money. We know that from previous chapters, especially when we talked about debt and everything. But how banks work is that they take your deposits. Let's say you have a job and you direct deposit your money into a bank. That means that your check goes directly into your checking account. That then becomes money that the bank can use. And since they're using your money, they're going to pay you interest. Interest rates these days are next to nothing. They are really negligible, meaning that you're not going to get a whole lot from them, but they're going to pay you some money for having your money in their bank. And so what they do with that money now is they go out and lend it to people who want to buy a car, or they lend it to people who want to buy a house, or they lend it to people who want to buy a boat, a motorcycle, you name it, they're probably going to send out a loan for it. Now, those people pay a higher interest rate. Home interest rates, I think, are just, if you have a prime credit history, which we talked about last unit, somewhere south of 4%, meaning less than 4%. Car loan, 4 to 5 to 6%. Boat loans higher than that, RV loans higher than that. So they are pretty much paying you nothing to borrow your money to lend it out to people who are going to pay them back in interest. So that's how banks make their money. That's how they pay their employees. That's how they keep their buildings. That's how they keep the lights on in their buildings. All right, so that is the concept behind banks and how they work. It's interest. They take your money, they loan it out to other people for a higher interest than what you're paying. Okay, one of the big reasons why you bank where you bank ends up being it's a location thing, meaning how close, how accessible do you want your money to you? A physical location or an online, you have the option to bank strictly online. There are banks that are online, Ally being one, ALLY.com. They pay higher interest rates. They give you better interest rates. When you borrow money, this is a choice. It's harder to deposit money, but if you're not depositing cash very often, an online bank would be a great choice. I like the idea of having the opportunity to walk into a bank and look someone in the face and talk to a teller and work through any problems I have. I have not done online banking. I actually would consider it though. If I were starting over, they weren't really a big option when I got into banking, and I've kind of already built up relationships with my current bank. So maybe it's something I do in the future. I currently like the idea of having a physical location. Do you want a bank that has multiple branches, meaning buildings you can walk into? Do you want to be up in Ogden and be able to go into the bank that is your bank and they have all your information? Or do you want to bank at a place where there's only one bank or it's a limited number of branches? My credit union only has one branch, and it's down there um, on Freedom and 8th North, somewhere in there, kind of by the district building. Um, I'm okay with that. That's where I actually put my savings. So I don't want a lot of accessibility there. But if I'm on the road and I see a KeyBank bank, I can go stop in and take care of any banking needs that might occur. And this kind of falls in line with that. You've got locations all across the U.S. Let's say that you go to college down in St. George, you go to Dixie State. Does your bank exist down there? If you're with Wells Fargo, KeyBank, Zions, you're probably okay. If you're with Central Bank, Bank of American Fork, UCCU, you're probably not going to be able to bank down there in St. George or up in Logan, or maybe you go out to Denver for college, whatever. You want to make sure that you have access to your money. Wells Fargo is pretty popular here in the Western United States. That's a bank that, like I said, I was with them earlier. I'm no longer with them. So you just have to make sure and see if the bank you choose has multiple branches. And then the other question